Okay, class, now that we have talked about the Constitution and we have learned that the Constitution outlines how our government, the United States government, should be established and what their responsibilities are, we're going to talk about how our government is ran, and we talked about it's divided into three branches: the judicial, the legislative, and the executive. And today I want to talk about the legislative branch. Now, the legislative branch is Congress, and Congress is made up of the House of Representatives and the Senate. Now, we kind of talked about how the Constitution, there was changes later made to the Constitution, and how the Constitution was ratified. Now, one of the reasons our Constitution was ratified, or we had these changes, is because the people were disagreeing on if we should have representation in Congress and Senate based upon the number of people from the state, or if it should be the same for each state. They should all have the same amount of representation. Well, we had a compromise during the ratification of the Constitution, and we came up with Senate, which means there's 2 senators to represent each state, and we have the House of Representatives. And if you have a larger state, then you'll have more representatives. If you have a smaller state, a smaller population in your state, then you'll have a lesser amount of representatives from your state. And so there's a compromise that everyone in the Senate, there's the same, 2 from each state. House of Representatives, there might be more representatives from California than there would be from Wyoming, because more people live in California and less people live in Wyoming. Now, that makes up the legislative branch. And the legislative branch has a special job. And we're going to talk about that a little later, but I want to show you where the legislative branch meets. And they are in Washington, D.C., and we can see it here. And they meet in what's called the Capitol Building. And I want to take you on a little tour of the Capitol Building, and you'll get to see what is inside. So if you look over here, this is taking us around. This is actually a live webcam inside the Capitol Building. So you can see there's such nice architecture, just a really beautiful building. Now as it goes around, you can see lots and lots of chairs. So this is where Congress, which is made out of our House of Representatives and our Senate, meets. And there's many rooms in the Capitol, so let's go look at another room real quick. I think this kind of reminds me of what it looked like in Independence Hall, where our Constitution was written. I think it looks a little bit similar. Do you guys think it looks a little bit similar? I mean, everyone has their own little desk. We saw that. Now, why does our Senate and our Congress need to meet? What decisions are they making? What role do they have in our government? So I want to talk about that next, after we've looked at our webcam inside of the Congress. So let's learn about what they do. And I have another Schoolhouse Rock video we're going to watch that will explain what they do. So at this point I would show the Schoolhouse Rock video, I'm Just a Bill. And this will help them understand how a bill becomes a law, and then we'll talk about that this is the job of the legislative branch, to create law. And first it starts out with a bill, and then goes to Capitol Hill, where we just toured, and it's debated by our senators and by our congressmen, and then if they pass it, both houses, then it can become a law. but the last step being that the president must sign off on it, and he does have his veto power. So we would watch that video, and then I would have a discussion with the students. I'd probably break them up in smaller groups, and they're going to discuss what laws they know of. What laws do we have right now? And then as a whole group, we'll share some ideas of what laws we have at the time, and then we're going to discuss, well, why is it important? Why should we have these laws? What do they do for us? I imagine they'll probably come up with things as safety, equality, making sure everyone has a fair chance, and all of these ideas, I'm going to make the connection back to the Constitution in the preamble, that domestic tranquility or peace within the United States was one of the goals of the preamble of our Constitution. And that is what is happening by creating these laws to ensure that domestic tranquility, making sure that everyone has liberties and freedoms and justice. So I'll make that connection between the Constitution and the legislative branch, which the Constitution sets up. After we've had that discussion, then I would show them just some of the pictures around the Capitol building. So here we've seen the inside. Now I want to show them the outside of the Capitol building. So I'd show them this picture right here. And then there's also just a ton of pictures around. So this is if I was looking from the Capitol building. This is a picture of General Grant. The Capitol building at night. I just love the glow of the Capitol building. It's pretty beautiful. So we would go around and look at some of the pictures to help them see the Capitol building. There's also a 360 tour, so if we're having time, I would allow them to explore that as well. After we have explored the pictures of the Capitol building shown here with Google Earth, I would then close up my lesson with having the students recap what makes up the legislative branch, how a bill becomes a law. Then I would have a mock law creation. I would have each of the students pick a state that they want to represent. They would each come up with something they believe should be a law, which is going to be their bill that they're trying to push through. And then I would have them share it with a couple of people, and then the class would vote on a couple of students they want to represent, they want to explain their bill to the class. So a couple of students would then present their bill to Congress, our class, and then we would vote. Do we want to pass it on to the Senate now to debate? And then we could do that. We could pass on the bill to Senate, which maybe could be like another classroom, and they could then debate our bill, and if it gets passed on, then they could pass it on to me, and I would represent the president, just so that they can more connect with how a bill becomes a law, and talk about my veto power, which we'll talk about more in the next virtual field trip. But just really want to ensure that they understand the legislative branch, what it's made up of, and what their job is, which is creating law.